From justice, equality, and world peace to straight dirt, here are some of the strangest last meal requests on death row. Number 11, John Wayne Gacy. Let's start this list with one of the most famous serial killers in history. Notoriously known as the Clown Killer, John Wayne Gacy was a vicious predator. His last meal request on death row is, unfortunately, the least bizarre thing about him. Why was he called the Clown Killer? Well, he used to go and dress up as a clown and go by the name Pogo or Patches, and that's not even the creepiest thing he did. He was a ruthless sex offender and serial killer who was able to avoid punishment proportionate to his crimes for years. He began acting out his inner demons when he started sexually assaulting boys while maintaining the persona of an outstanding citizen, working as a manager at KFC restaurants and presenting his family man facade. Eventually, he was charged and convicted and had to serve an 18-month prison sentence following his assault of a boy. He even remarried and started working in construction afterwards. His killer instincts amplified, however, so he started not only assaulting, but killing boys and young men during his time known as the cruising years and burying them under his own home. In 1994, Gacy was executed by lethal injection. But right before justice was finally served, he ordered a ridiculous and disturbing last meal that consisted of 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. Number 10, James Edward Smith. One of the most insane and bizarre last meal requests on this list was made by James Edward Smith. Smith was a tarot card dealer working as a Houston taxi driver. He was sentenced to death by lethal injection for the murder of insurance executive Larry D. Rojas in 1983. Apparently, Smith shot Rojas during a robbery inside the cashier's office near the Astrodome. After he had been convicted and sentenced to death, he was executed on June 26, 1990. Reportedly, his mother won him a reprieve, claiming he suffered from mental health issues, but Smith was convinced it was his time to die and move on to the spiritual world. And what was his bizarre last meal request? A lump of dirt. He was going to perform a voodoo ritual in order to ensure that his spirit would move on and that he wouldn't become a ghost. His request was denied and he got a cup of yogurt instead. So I guess his ghost is now stuck haunting the place for a couple of centuries. Number 9, Velma Barfield. Death row granny Velma Barfield managed to beat 2 records. She was the first woman to be executed after the 1976 resumption of capital punishment and the first woman to be executed by lethal injection. She was also very skilled at something else: poisoning people. Barfield was convicted of the murder of Roland Stewart Taylor, her boyfriend, after having had suspicions that he had discovered her practice of forging checks on his account. Barfield murdered Taylor by mixing arsenic-based rat poison into his beer and tea. Although she subsequently confessed to having murdered 6 other people, she was convicted only for the murder of Taylor. She was executed on November 2, 1984 in Central Prison. She released a statement before her execution. "I know that everyone has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I am sorry and I want to thank everybody who have been supporting me all these 6 years." Wow, what a considerate serial killer. What do you know? Velma's last meal consisted of, wait for it, cheese doodles and a Coke. What the heck are cheese doodles? Hey, before we continue, I just want to say thanks for checking out the channel. Give this video a like and hit that subscribe button for more videos like these. Number 8, John William Elliott. Sometimes, thinking about absurd last meals murderers on death row requested distract us, at least temporarily, from the horrific nature of their crimes. One such despicable act was done by John William Elliott, who was 26 when he murdered 19-year-old Joyce McVeigh in East Austin on June 13, 1986. According to police reports, Elliott sexually assaulted Joyce and then beat her to death with a motorcycle chain, hitting her 16 times on the head and 8 times on the face with a chrome-plated chain. Elliott made 3 clemency requests, one for a pardon, one for commutation and one for a reprieve. His last meal was an odd choice, to say the least. Apparently, Elliott requested a cup of English tea and 6 chocolate chip cookies. Hey, even monstrous murderers want comfort food in the face of their impending execution. Number 7. Victor Figuier. One of the oldest and oddest cases on this list includes the drifter and murderer Victor Figuier. What's interesting about this case, aside from his bizarre last meal request, is the fact that he was the last federal inmate executed in the United States before Timothy McVeigh, and the last person to be executed in the state of Iowa. Figuier was a drifter who arrived in Iowa, rented a room, and phoned Dr. Edward Bartles, claiming someone needed medical attention. When the doctor arrived, Figuier murdered the doctor with a single shot to the head. He was arrested a few days later while trying to sell Bartel's car. It's believed that Figuier killed the doctor in order to obtain any drugs Bartel might have had to treat patients. Federal charges were filed against Victor because he crossed state lines. In 1963, he was hanged for killing Dr. Bartels. And as for his last meal, he requested a single olive. The olive was subsequently found in the pocket of the suit he died in. He was buried in an unmarked grave in Fort Madison. Bone-chilling stuff. Number 6. Philip Workman. One sunny day on August 5, 1981, a man went into a Wendy's restaurant in Memphis, Tennessee, and committed a robbery. That man's name is Philip Workman, who had already served 25 months for burglary and drug possession. Sounds like a nice guy so far. What happened after the burglary remains controversial. Apparently, after the police officer came into the Wendy's, Workman ran, and after being hit over the head with a flashlight, a gun fired and killed the police officer in question. Workman had spent many years in prison before his execution in 2007, trying to prove his innocence by claiming that it wasn't his gun that killed the unfortunate police officer. Even after a testimony by a forensics expert whose opinion was that the bullet that killed the police officer possibly wasn't from Workman's gun, didn't help. Workman was still found guilty and executed in 2007. His last meal request surprised and even inspired many people who began to question the supposition that Workman was even capable of murder. Namely, he requested a vegetarian pizza, not for himself, but for any homeless person. His request was denied, and Workman declined any other meal for himself. This apparently selfless and random act of kindness from a convicted criminal inspired many to start reaching out to homeless people and offering them vegetarian pizzas. I guess at least something good came out of the tragedy. Number 5. Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh developed a fascination with guns in his teens and used that penchant for firearms for heinous purposes. He was also obsessed with honing his survivalist skills, believing they would come in handy in case the Cold War with the Soviet Union would escalate. After high school, McVeigh lacked any direction or purpose, so he joined the U.S. Army, where he proved to be a disciplined and very meticulous soldier. I think you know where this is going. On April 21st, 1995, McVeigh conducted one of the worst attacks on U.S. soil in the history of attacks on U.S. soil. The 27-year-old former U.S. Army soldier had become a member of a radical survivalist right-wing group and had been part of that group for quite some time before he committed an unspeakable crime. He carried out the Oklahoma City bombing that killed 168 people and injured more than 680 others, as well as destroyed a third of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. He was convicted and sentenced to death. He died on June 11, 2011, by lethal injection. This horrific crime was contrasted by his morbidly fascinating last meal request. Apparently, all he wanted before his execution were 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. Number 4. David Leon Woods. This savage crime took place in Garrett, Indiana, on April 7, 1984. David Leon Woods, armed with a knife and 2 accomplices, went to the home of Juan Plasencia to steal a television. After 77-year-old Juan had opened the door following a doorbell, Wood immediately jumped in and proceeded to stab the unfortunate old man 21 times in total, and then took the money from his wallet. He then went on to wash his bloody clothes with his accomplices and threw the knife in the creek. When police arrived, Woods was sitting on the porch, claiming to have found Juan's body after having come there to use the phone. His mother came to the scene and told the police she believed her son had committed the murder. His own mother knew he was a monster. Woods was taken to the station where he broke down and gave a complete confession. He was given the death sentence that was carried out on May 4, 2007. This vicious killer is distinct from his peers in that he had a very special request for his last meal. He wanted a birthday cake and a pizza to eat with his family. Before his execution, he even stated that he was sorry and he had a conscience. Too little, too late. Number 3, Eileen Walsh. One of the most infamous serial killers who got a fair share of fame, courtesy of Hollywood, is Eileen Walsh. She is rather unique in several ways. Eileen had a difficult childhood. Her parents separated before she was even born, and as a child, she had to witness her father being committed to a mental institution. In her early teens, she dropped out of high school and turned to doing tricks on the street, and that's where her criminal activities began. She was imprisoned for driving while intoxicated and for firing a gun from a moving car. She was arrested numerous times for armed robbery, auto theft, and check forgery. Things really started to escalate for Eileen in 1989 to 1990, when she started hitchhiking, posing as a prostitute, and killing 7 men. Some even speculate there might have been an 8th victim. After her arrest, she admitted to killing the men, but claimed that she had acted in self-defense. Eileen's last meal is, well, not a meal at all. She declined meals, but requested a cup of coffee before she was executed with lethal injection in 2002. I somehow doubt that she was a low-energy coffee junkie. Number 2, Christopher Brooks. What is it with these hardened, death-sentenced criminals and their absurd last meal requests on death row? Christopher Brooks is definitely one of them. He was convicted of sexual assault, murder, and the robbery of Joe Dean Campbell committed in 1992. After having been state executed for his horrendous crime, it was confirmed that Brooks was the first person to be executed in Alabama in 2.5 years. Media and others who were present during his execution claimed that he did not appear to be nervous, anxious, or emotionally distressed at all. So he was cold-blooded. Who would have thought? His creepy last words were, "I hope to see you soon." Scary. Scariness of his demeanor before and during the execution was only matched by the absurdity of his last meal choice. Apparently, he requested just 2 peanut butter cups and a Mr. Pepper. Dude, you don't have to be modest with your food choices while you're on death row for committing a terrible crime. You aren't getting bonus points to go to heaven. Number 1, Odell Barnes. According to police reports, in 1989, 31-year-old Odell Barnes committed robbery and the murder of a woman named Helen Bass in Wichita, Texas. He beat her with a lamp and a rifle, and then proceeded to stab her in the neck and shoot her in the head. Police reports claim that Helen's body was found on her bed, where Barnes had previously assaulted her. He then stole a pistol and an undisclosed amount of money from her home. While he was counting the hours to his execution, Barnes had a choice regarding his last meal. Do you think he ordered an expensive, extravagant meal to make his last day on Earth pleasurable? Nah. His last meal request was just good old justice, equality, and world peace. Talk about a low-calorie meal. Thanks for watching. Which one of these last meal requests do you think is the most strange? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!